Hello, hello. My name is Cyril War.
And this is Brian Roig. Welcome to the Shaping Spirit podcast. We're just a couple of guys from California who've collected a bunch of academic degrees, studying spirituality all over the world, bringing it right back here to you to bring you the one and only truly non-sectarian spirituality podcast in the world. And with that being said, Cyril, my man, what is the topic of the day?
Spirituality is a state of mind.
I love it.
Spirituality is a state of mind.
Yeah, that's cool. I think, since we've been talking so much about, these types of integrations of spirituality in our life, I think it is important that we talk about how spirituality becomes a state of mind, right? And what are the components of spirituality being a state of mind? I think
who's that African-American sort of jazz pop pianist singer who wrote like a New York State of Mind?
That New York State of Mind is Billy Joel.
No, there's another one, a more recent one.
I don't know. That's the only one I know is...
I think it's Jay-Z.
New York State of Mind is Billy Joel, man.
That's old, but there's a new one, which is by nowhere. Yeah, well, Billy Joel, sure. There's another one, dude. There's another one. Oh, well. You just threw me for thinking of a song here, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't listen to that type of stuff. So,
well, anyone of our listeners right now, dial in right now and help us out on finding out, clearing up who. Oh man. Anyway, next podcast session, I'll bring this super crucial information without which we cannot, go deeper in our spirituality.
So let's talk about this state of mind, spirituality, being a state of mind. I think there's components that we need to kind of unpack, unravel, and, kind of dig into a bit.
Well, we both did agree on speaking on a famous. There's this famous statement from the ancient wisdom of the world, which talks about the state of mind, right? And it's like 4 components, right?
Yes.
Like being really like humility being one.
Yes.
What's the other one? Tolerance.
Tolerance.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what's the third and fourth one?
Respect.
Yeah.
Giving respect.
Going both ways.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Giving respect and not necessarily trying to expect respect in return,
right.
But really focusing on how we are respecting others and showing respect to all people.
So let's break them down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, Empire State of Mind. Alicia Keys and Jay-Z.
Okay. There you go.
Great song. All right.
Empire State of Mind.
So now we can totally focus.
All right. So we're going to go from Empire State of Mind to spirituality state of mind. Okay, so let's look at humility. I mean, humility...
Pride cometh before the fall.
Yeah, here's the thing with humility, and we've kind of briefly touched on this in other episodes. Saying you're humble is not humility.
Yeah, that's the one thing you can never say, I'm really humble.
Yeah, so
I'm one of the most humble guys in the world.
Yeah, that doesn't fly. I like this, when we're talking about this ancient wisdom and these ancient Eastern sayings, they liken humility to being like a blade of grass.
Yeah,
you have this functionality where you can bend, right? You're bendable, not where you break. And this is the difference where people don't understand. Humility doesn't mean to break. You're not breaking like a piece of straw, right? So you're not breaking, but you're strong enough in your spiritual root that you know how to bend and you keep your ego in check, because ultimately our idea is to abandon the false ego. That false ego lends us to this concept.
People call it ego, false ego, right?
Yeah, lends us to this concept of I, me, mine, where the world is about me, when we should graduate to the stage of the world is not about me.
Will Smith, Me, Myself, and I.
Oh, geez. I have no idea.
Me, Myself, and I. Me, Myself. Remember that song from the
I don't
90s?
listen to that.
God. Sorry. Missing out on this great song. Or Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
That one I remember, yeah.
That was a great one.
Yeah, that was a good one. So, when we look at humility, I can just use the example of how I teach my students in my jiu-jitsu studio. There's this saying, leave your ego at the door. Most other martial arts schools and even jiu-jitsu schools, these are some of the most egotistical maniacs I've ever met in my life. They try
teachers?
Oh my God. They try and deify themselves, and the students become the same way. And it becomes like cults of personality. When in reality, you should always be in that mindset of growing and learning. And that tends to keep us in a more humble state, because the more you learn, to realize how little you know. And you should always find opportunities to learn from others. Even if something is being said to you where it's not palatable, this is where you have an ego check, right? And where the humility kicks in. Even if it's not palatable, how do you sit back and listen and go, okay, well, what is that nugget of wisdom that I can take from this? Where can I get it to resonate and gleam from within? Right? That's a little, it sounds simple, but it can actually be incredibly complicated and a challenging process for all of us. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
I think, people, their pride gets in the way of so many things, right? Pride gets in the way of asking for help. Pride gets in the way of working with others. Pride gets in the way of getting along with others. Or just, working in the next step of what we were talking about, how to be tolerant like a tree, right? What does that mean? To be able to...
Well, before we go to tolerance, a tiny theological... I like to talk theology.
Sure.
So a tiny theological parenthesis. Mm-hmm. If we look at two different models of spirituality that exist worldwide, you can basically categorize every spiritual tradition on earth into two major categories. One being sort of a theistic, category where the individual person has a relationship with the divine, right? Mm-hmm. And while the individual person is divine, that individual person is also not completely like 100% God, like in the sense of, fully omniscient, fully, omnipresent, mm-hmm. fully right? And then there's the other category where, and again, you can find actually veins of this particular second category in every tradition of the world. The idea that ultimately there's no distinction whatsoever between the self and the divine. Mm-hmm. We are all 100% of the divine, and ultimately it's just one, right?
Yeah.
Right, to merge into the oneness and all that. So out of those two paradigms, I believe that this, and while I respect all of them, and we encourage everybody on this podcast to go deep in whichever tradition they resonate with, some food for thought. I personally believe let's say it's easier. Let's just say it's easier, in my opinion, in my very, very humble opinion, sarcasm. I think it's easier to be humble, or to have a humble disposition toward the other, when one is operating in the former category and not the latter. Anyway, parenthesis closed. Let's go to the second thing.
Yeah, that makes
tolerance.
Sense. I do want to say that makes sense. What you're saying. And we can actually, also table these concepts for another podcast, because I think obviously you and I can go really deep into the rabbit hole with that.
Yeah.
Because there is a notion of spirituality and non-distinction. And then there's, a notion of spirituality and absolute distinction. And then there's a notion of both, right? A notion of spirituality of simultaneous distinction and non-distinction.
So let's keep that for another.
Yeah, we'll keep that for another
episode.
one because I love that topic so much. Man, we could talk about that for hours.
Yeah, it's abstract, but it actually has very practical, applications.
Very practical and very. I feel that when you kind of learn how to kind of reconcile it all and harmonize it, I find it very soothing and reassuring. And go, oh, okay, that's what this means. This is what we're doing. This is why. Okay, it makes sense. I think, like I said, we'll get into it in another podcast, but I do believe there's a particular aspect and conclusion to that which is the most easiest to resonate with and makes the most sense.
So second point, tolerance.
Tolerance like a tree.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah. And then let me describe this one since you described the first one. So
sure.
the tree analogy, if I get it right, is that, a tree tolerates the blazing hot weather or, the super cold weather and doesn't complain. Mm-hmm. The tree, gets its branches cut, doesn't say anything. The tree, has, I don't know, Carlos and Juliet come and carve out a heart, in its body, basically, with a knife, saying, Carlos loves Juliet. It doesn't say anything. Mm-hmm. And yet the tree still, gives its fruits. The tree gives its shade and doesn't complain. Yeah. So it's a really nice analogy, in terms of tolerance. If you can meditate on how tolerant a tree is, then, you'll next time you won't go into a road rage, for example, right?
Well, you try.
I know that would touch you because in LA people are really,
it's horrible.
Really
uptight
Southern
in traffic,
California
side everywhere I go. It's just and
you spend a lot of hours in.
Oh my
traffic,
God!
Right,
Sometimes I wish I had water balloons filled with ink, where I could just throw them at cars to just get them out of the way. No, but so what's interesting about this second.
One time, I was going to UCLA for a while, and on Westwood Boulevard, actually on the Wilshire Boulevard, close to Westwood, some guy cut me off, as we were exiting the freeway, and this was it was traffic, it was what's it called? It was rush hour, so the red light was on, and there was this long backed up line of cars. I literally got out of my car and walked up to his car and started screaming at him.
Nice.
Yeah, man. Anyway, so what were you saying?
So
this was long ago, by the way, before I became very humble and wise.
So there was a book I read when I was a kid by Shel Silverstein called The Giving Tree. I don't know if you ever read that book, but I think anybody could read it. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult. It profoundly impacted me. And it was literally about a relationship this little boy had with a tree and the tolerance and love that the tree gave. And as they grew together, just how he kind of had this relationship with this tree, and the tree saw this boy turn into a teenager, to a young adult, to a man, and then an old man, and everything it went through. And the tree never complained, even when he was being chopped to pieces and everything. And
interesting.
But this point reminds me of this book, The Giving Tree. And so I highly recommend everybody to check out the book, The Giving Tree. It's a very short book. It's really like a kid's book. But it's a beautiful story. And for me, it's very much how do we build this? And I want to throw something out to you, so maybe you can help us kind of reconcile this point. How do you have the ability to be tolerant like a tree, yet at the same time
discriminate?
To have enough discrimination to not take shit from people, right? Because being tolerant like a tree doesn't mean to be abused.
Right.
So I do want to bring that. I do want to bring that point up. Is that it's we're not about saying, okay, if you're going to work towards humility and tolerance, be tolerant like a tree.
You shouldn't get out of a toxic relationship.
Yeah,
because
that's not it at all. And I think that this is a crucial point we can look at and really maybe discuss a little bit, because I think there is a distinction between humility and that level of tolerance versus abuse, regardless if it's physical, emotional, mental abuse. These are types of things when if somebody is toxic to you or abusive, a bully or anything like that, these are things that we have to be aware of and say that, no, categorically, that's not okay.
Here's my thoughts on the thing. There's certain situations where shit comes your way and you literally can't avoid it. Right. For example, being stuck in a traffic jam, and I don't know, and then the guy right next to you and then in the lane next to you has like super loud subwoofers, right? And is playing, I don't know, whatever, hip hop or thrash metal, whatever, super loud. And maybe you're trying to listen to a lecture, or you're trying to do some praying or some some whatever, you want some quiet in your car. You're listening to some Mozart or something. And you can't get out of that situation, right? You just got to, bite the bullet and be tolerant, right? You get into an accident. You I don't know, cutting vegetables in your kitchen, and you cut your finger. Of course, you take care of it, but the pain that's there, what are you going to do? Of course, you're going to try to mitigate it and take a painkiller if you want. But my point is that there's certain situations where you have no choice, and then you just got to tolerate. But there's certain other situations where if you can get out of, and if, especially like you say, if it's clearly wrong, if it's clearly going against, your own dignity or justice or like Platonic notions of truth and justice, and then not getting out of such a toxic situation is actually foolish. It's actually falsely humble or falsely tolerant.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say.
No, it makes sense. That totally makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we were really clear on that point, that we're not telling anybody to be like, if you're in an abusive relationship, that you should stay in there for the sake of humility and tolerance and
right,
showing somebody else respect. No. When we're looking at this as a spirituality, being a state of mind, we're looking to grow, obviously, beyond the material confines of our personal daily existence, right? And we need to learn. And this is, one of our teachers used to say all the time, learn what is kind of helpful in your spiritual growth, and to accept and embrace what's helpful in your spiritual growth, and learn to categorically reject anything that is not favorable to your spiritual growth.
Right.
And if somebody is disrupting your personal identity, and trying to kind of create this motion in your life that is just like a swirling sense of toxicity. Maybe it's just like everything in your life around this person, or types of people, where everything has to be their way. There's no flexibility. They just completely disrespect you. They're abusive. They call you names. These types of things. This is not acceptable ever, because it is not conducive to your spiritual growth. And obviously it's not conducive to having a satisfactory material existence at all.
Yeah.
So, that humility, that tolerance is really something best utilized in good company, I think. Right?
That sort of ties into the third point, the third and fourth point, the idea of respect, like they're all tied into each other, these four things, humility, tolerance, and the idea of giving all respects to others. And let's tackle this one in one shot, 3 and 4, because they're really related to each other.
Yeah.
So giving all respect to others and expecting none in return. And that's so contrary to this sort of culture of entitlement.
Yeah.
That we're, right? Oh my God. It's like, whatever. And I'm not, whether it's, I'm going to go on both sides of the spectrum here, okay? Whether it's like ultra woke liberal or ultra conservative right. So, whether I use the example of Black Lives Matters, entitlement, or, whatever, white victimhood as a result of, it's like on every side of the spectrum, gay or straight, like I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And while there is justification, again, because if we're seeing an obvious or a clear, visible breach or endangerment or attack on, principles of justice, of divinity, of devotion, of truth, and so on, then yeah, okay. But it goes overboard so much, and it just becomes a self-serving, like ego-feeding, and sometimes and often, financial pocket feeding, trip, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to use a very, kind of crude example here, but when I was growing up, I was in middle school and high school and stuff. I had horrible school experiences. I always like to tell people I was a victim of the Los Angeles Unified School District. Literally one of the worst school districts in the country. It was horrible. Both my middle school and high school were plagued with gangs and violence. It was just vile. Anyways, the point I wanted to bring up was that universally, it was so interesting, all these gang members and all these guys that were getting into fights and attacking people and all this stuff, it always came down to the same thing. You disrespected me.
Right.
So their concept in their mind was, if you disrespect me, I need to kill you, or I need to beat you, or we need to gang up and get you and just beat this person. But their concept of respect was something that they really never learned in terms of how to give respect, because they didn't have parents in the home. Primarily, if you look at most cases of where there's issues, especially with young people, teenagers, because there's no father figure in the home that's setting them right, that's giving them parameters of how to teaching them respect, humility, tolerance, how to check their ego, this types of thing. You see it over and over and over again. You look at all these guys in jail, most of them, they've never had a dad, right? And, here's the thing. To me, respect and humility go hand in hand. And then this concept of giving respect and not expecting any respect in return, it's more like, so we kind of need to kind of tease this out a little bit, because it's not like you're showing somebody respect and they walk up and spit in your face and be like, hey, that's cool, I'm not expecting any respect in return, you can just spit in my face. That's not what this is.
Right.
What this means is you're not showing respect and an honor to somebody with a sense or an idea of reciprocation, right? It's not an exchange. It's not a transactional state of mind, right? So giving respect is not transactional.
Right.
Especially
that's really if you tie it in with the second point of not expecting respect in return.
Yes.
Explicitly.
Yeah. And so, there's levels of respect. And one of the levels of respect that I really enjoy, and I use it more than I care to even say, is called respect from a distance.
You like to give that type to others.
Yes. So, and the reason why this is so important is because I truly value my spiritual state of mind. I value my personal emotions, my mental state, materially and spiritually. And I choose not to engage with people that I know that say will ruffle my feathers or go out of their way to disrespect me or belittle me. And so I can just sit there literally from a distance, folded palms. I wish you well. I wish you the best. I'm not saying anything negative, but I won't get close to that fire. I won't. Right. And that is my method of showing respect. I'm not expecting any respect in return. Okay. But I also know that this particular individual or these types of people, they're no good for my state of mind. they're no good for my growth. So I don't have to engage them. So giving respect is on different levels, of engagement. You can respect from a distance. You can respect from up close. You can respect from a level of, deep interpersonal relationship, So you can measure how you need to engage a particular person, right? You could just, and here's another way, you can just respect somebody's cultural preferences. So as an example, I've had people that had come to jiu-jitsu classes before, and culturally, there were some women that didn't want to, kind of grapple and roll with men because culturally or, from their background, they didn't want to engage with men physically, even though it's a physical sport, what we do. And you have to learn how to fight everybody, but okay, you have to make and just kind of respect that and just ask, hey, are you willing to grapple with men, or is this something that, you're not comfortable with? Oh, then they would reply, thank you for asking. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. Okay, then sit out, watch the class, and, that's that. And then, if another girl comes, you can roll with her, grapple with her. If not, then you can hang out, watch the class, and learn that way. So that's another form of respect, right? So just respecting somebody's, maybe their cultural preferences or their background, to make sure that they're comfortable in a situation. It's not like you have to adopt what they're doing, but just be like, okay, cool,
There's a connection between this fourth, this third and fourth principle, not expecting respect in return, offering all respects to others. Mm-hmm. To the first principle of humility. Mm-hmm. And again, coming back to this, I want to make a small theological parenthesis. If you're operating in a system, in a paradigm, okay, mm-hmm. where, and let's just use really sort of cliche Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic, and even some Asian traditions hold them, because there are, theistic traditions in the East, contrary to what a lot of people think. Let's just use a real cliche, word here or terminology. And we shouldn't throw the baby with the wash water. It may sound cliche, but actually if there's some good in it, conceptually, then we shouldn't bag on it. Mm-hmm. But for the example, right? God is great.
Okay.
God is great and I'm small, right?
Yeah.
Or God is great and I'm God's servant, mm-hmm. right? I mean, to get really sort of... So just assuming someone's operating in that paradigm where one sees himself or herself as, as divine in quality, and we'll get to that. We'll do a whole podcast on this exclusion, inclusion, and, like non-dual, dual, mm-hmm. And simultaneously one and different. That's awesome. But okay, coming back to this. So imagine someone's operating in a system where he or she, for better or for worse, or, whether it's true or not, that's not the point, but he or she believes that, hey, I'm small, I'm pretty insignificant. Again, it's not self-deprecating, we're not talking about whipping yourself with chains or, but I'm small and God's great, right? And I'm not God, I'm not the creator of the universe. Mm-hmm. I was created and I'm small. So just using that paradigm, all right, which is kind of like the real rough and tough, unsophisticated version of that first category I was talking about, the theistic category or theistic paradigm. Mm-hmm. Then you compare that to, paradigm number 2, where, and again, I don't want to, insult anyone or make any gross generalizations, but again, we could sort of use typical terminology. We're all one. Ultimately, everyone is, every person is one. We're all one. We're all God. You are God. I'm God. We're all God. Right? Mm-hmm. So out of those two paradigms, again, it just seems a lot easier to offer respects to others mm-hmm. and to expect none in return if you see others as parts and, as integral parts of the divine, and you also being an integral part of the divine, but still the divine being, supreme, and you being minute or very small, mm-hmm. right? There's this notion of reducing the self or acknowledging the self is very, very dependent on God, for example, as opposed to, you know what, I'm going to walk around and, you know, I'm God.
Yeah.
You're God. We're all God, man. Well, you know, then why should I offer respect to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Parenthesis close.
It's very true. It's very, very true. You know, ultimately, these functions. So why did we even bring this up?
Exactly. I mean, God, sometimes we think so clear. I was just going to say, I had a professor at University of California, Riverside, and he used to quote a professor of his who would say, you know, what's the BFD? Mm-hmm. We just spoke now for like 40 minutes or whatever, right, on these 4 principles. Mm-hmm. What's the BFD? What's the BFD? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
In order for us to develop our spiritual life and really kind of push our consciousness further spiritually, these are the basic tenets in the state of mind we need to be in to really be clear. This offers us clarity. Because the other point of this is for us to be able to get and engage in a form of meditation, to literally tune in, like we've talked about, right? Turn on, tune in, and drop out, the old Timothy Leary saying. How do we do that if we do not have these principles set? You're going to be so distracted, you're not going to be able to meditate. You're not even going to be able to relish.
Good point. Now you're getting practical.
Right? So let's say you have a particular name of God. Now, I'm getting a little theological here, but let's say there's a particular name of God that you find most attractive, or a particular prayer. How are you going to be able to integrate that prayer in an honest way in your life if you're so distracted by your ego, you know, with everything around you, with levels of, you know, just disrespecting others, being intolerant? There's no way. There's no way for you to grow unless you have these basic principles down. This is what creates that state of mind to grow spiritually.
Good point. It just gives you a better technology that you can use to just go deeper in your spirituality, right? It just helps you be more efficient in growing spiritually.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to. I mean, these are, in my opinion, these points that we brought up today are non-negotiables. It's non-negotiable, and ultimately these are, in my opinion, also these are universal principles. I don't care what culture somebody's from. I don't care what religious background they have. Right? Makes no difference. I don't think you will find a single tradition on this planet that will tell you to be against these principles. I can't think of one. You know, and we've studied quite a bit, right? I don't think there's a Taoist that would disagree with this. I don't think there's a Christian or a Muslim that would disagree with this. I don't think there's a Buddhist or a Hindu that would disagree with this.
Yeah, it's very universal.
It's very universal. Because regardless of what your religious flavoring is, you need to have these principles down, adopted, and integrated.
And work on them at least.
You have to.
You have to work on them just like, you know.
It's a daily practice.
You work on them, it's a daily practice.
It's a daily, we cannot go, I mean, every time you engage, you know, I love listening to, you know, audiobooks or podcasts or, you know, the books that I read. But every time I pick something up, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. I'm blown away about how much I don't know. And I personally enjoy it. I love being a student. I love being in that state of mind where it's just like, teach me something. Tell me something I didn't know, or help me understand this nuanced point deeper. I love that. It makes me happy. You know, I find so much satisfaction from learning from others. And it doesn't mean going to a particular school and an institution or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. gravitating towards these things to, number one, admit, wow, I know so little. Right? You are not, I was reading this saying the other day. I was going to mention this to you. Is like people when they're younger, they think the world is about them, right? And then they're so concerned about what people think of them that their whole life revolves around, when you're a teenager or maybe in your 20s, you're so hung up on what people think about you that you try to act a particular way. Then you get a little bit older, say into your 40s, a little bit older, then you don't care what people think about you, right? You're like, whatever, I'm living my life. I'm here to grow myself. I'm here to do me, right? But then there's a third point to that, a little third caveat to all of it. Then you get towards the end of your life and you realize nobody was thinking about you to begin with.
Yeah.
Boom, there it is. Drop the mic, friends. Nobody was thinking about you to begin with. Stop putting yourself at the center of the world. We've talked about this before, and obviously we can table this also for another podcast, but hold on. This is one of the key problems with atheism. Because atheism, the world is centered around you. This ideology that there's nothing greater than yourself is a huge problem.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about Bob?
Well, that famous, I think I quoted him already in one of our past episodes, live for yourself and you will live in vain, live for others and you will live again, So everybody, try to focus on these 4 principles, try it out, meditate on those 4 principles in your life, being more humble than a blade of grass, tolerant like the tree, right? Mm-hmm. Remembering to give respect to others, not being, not expecting respect from others, and in that state of mind, then you'll see how your spiritual life, the spiritual dimension of your life, improves.
Yeah.
Improves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it.
Great.
Good stuff.
Good stuff, my friends. So we thank you, and let us stay together, remembering that we're much more than our physical bodies. We are not matter, but we matter, and let's stay together with that state of mind.
ShapingSpiritPodcast@gmail.com. Keep those comments coming, questions. We love hearing from you, and any questions you have, throw it our way. Give us topics, and we're happy to use that as well. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.